Celebrating 35 years of creativity and collaboration, the Veil Dance Festival returns July 28th through August 7th with 12 thrilling performances and numerous special events, including live podcast recordings of conversations on dance, all across the beautiful Vail Valley. Don't miss the legendary Martha Graham Dance Company, LA Dance Project, Music from the Soul, Ballet X, Dance Aspen, and an all-star cast of festival artists from New York City Ballet, American Ballet Theatre, the Royal Danish Ballet, Boston Ballet, and many more. Tickets for our live podcast recordings are now available at vaildance.org/conversations-on-dance or click the link in the show notes. Tickets for festival performances are also available now at vaildance.org. See you this summer. I'm Rebecca King Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Sean Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance. Today on Conversations on Dance, we are joined by acclaimed ballerina Misty Copeland and Emmy Award-winning TV producer and writer Leyla Fayyaz. We talked to Misty and Leyla about how they first met as young ballerinas at American Ballet Theatre, reconnecting to create life in motion productions, the stories they want to tell in their new work, and their first short film, Flower, which recently premiered at Tribeca Film Festival. For more information on Flower and life in motion productions, follow at Oakland Flower Film on Instagram. Leyla and Misty, thank you both for joining us. We're so excited to talk to you about your collaboration on the film Flower. But before we got into that, Leyla, we haven't had you on the podcast yet, so we've got to get a little bit of background with you. But Misty, we haven't had you on in, I think, 6 years. So, a few things have happened with you. But one that we always like to talk about, just because it's such a joyful thing, is you're a new mother, and Rebecca's also a new mother. So it's just something we always love to bring up on the pod. How's that experience been for you?
I mean, I'm looking down right now because I'm actually texting my husband to tell him to keep Jackson away while we film or we record. It's been everything and more than I imagined. I come from a big family. I'm one of 6 kids, and I always knew that I wanted a family. But as a woman, as an artist, as an athlete, it's so hard to find that balance and to make the time and still be able to continue on in your career and have it's so complicated. And
right.
And I feel fortunate to have found the time, and COVID was really a blessing in disguise for me for so many reasons. Having my son Jackson, I wrote 2 books. Leyla and I really got Life in Motion off the ground because we had, the time to really focus on it. I started my foundation. So it's been a very productive time, and Flower, was birthed during that time, which was also another blessing in disguise with all of the challenges we had because of the pandemic.
Oh, there's so much to talk about. Oh my gosh. I just think you've been everywhere with all these sorts of things, but I do wonder, what has it been like? I'm retired, so in my body, I can't even imagine. I tried to do fifth position the other day, and I was like, wow, what is this? This is very foreign. And I feel like we maybe I had my son August 1st last year. Was you around the same time?
April.
Okay.
2nd.
So how is that body feeling getting back into ballet for you?
I'm really taking my time. It's been a journey for me. I had my insane injury about 10 years ago, and I'm still, the injury was really to prevent anything from happening further. I had 6 stress fractures in my tibia, and so it didn't relieve the pain. So I'd been dancing the last, before the pandemic, the last 10 years with severe pain. So I'm really kind of taking a step back and taking my time in terms of what that looks like for physicality and for my body. Having the opportunity to do all of these other things that are really working towards the same goal as my whole career has been when I'm on stage. And so all of that to say, I'm not doing fifth position right now.
Oh, good. That makes me feel better. No, I'm just kidding.
and I really was taking taking my time and finding like a new fitness journey, and we'll see when I get back on stage.
That's
Right.
good.
Right. Layla, we want to hear a little bit about your journey with fifth position. I'd love to just hear, since it's your first time on the pod.
Yeah.
What's your initial background in dance? Tell us a little bit about that.
I started dancing when I was 10 or 11 years old. I'd taken gymnastics before that. I was always a little too tall for gymnastics either way, but I loved it. And then my mom was like, "Oh, you can't do this anymore. Some of your friends are getting injured. I'm nervous." And now I understand as a mom, because I have a daughter in gymnastics, I can't even watch her do gymnastics. I get so nervous. But so she made me stop, and then was like, "Well, there's dance classes instead. I'll put you in ballet." And as soon as I started, I just like loved it. I mean, I was like a 10-year-old with like 6-year-olds because I didn't have any training. So I was like much bigger and like it was awkward, but I didn't care. I was in the zone immediately, and I found, you know, a way to express myself, a way to get out of the house and kind of have my own world that was just mine. And I loved it. And so I did that, and I progressed really quickly because I did have natural ability, you know, good feet, as they say, and a little hyperextension in the legs, like all those things they used to say were great for dance. And so I ended up getting a scholarship to go to the Herod Conservatory. So I trained at the Herod Conservatory for 2 years. And then I won the very first ever Youth America Grand Prix competition. It was the first year they ever did it. Larissa Sevilla was like, yes, Larissa was going around to the different schools looking for people and telling them to, you know, enter this competition. I did it. I won regionals and then nationals, and that I got the Grand Prix, and that came with a studio company contract. And I actually turned the studio company contract down because that summer beforehand, I had gone to the Vail Valley, the summer program there. And I had an offer from the Stuttgart Ballet to train at their John Cranko school. They were going to take me to the Prix de Lausanne. Yeah. And so I had already confirmed with them, like, this is what I was doing. So I turned down studio company, and I went to Germany for 2 months. And it was really difficult, I have to say, because there was culture shock. I was like 16 years old on my own, you know, didn't really like know what was going on, and didn't assimilate very easily into the school because they had all been there the entire year. And I just stepped in the summer. And then there were like other things. So it was hard emotionally, I think, for me. And then I came back just for a 2-week break to the States. And I went to a program at Kotzbahn that, you know, Martine Van Hamel and Kevin McKenzie had just started this dance program there. And I mean, now it's a much bigger thing. But again, one of the first years they were doing it. So I went, and when I was there every day, like either Kevin McKenzie or John Meehan, who at the time was the artistic director of the studio company, would come to me at lunch, take me aside, and tell me why I needed to join the studio company. Like I needed to change my mind. And I'm like, well, I have all my stuff in Germany, and like, I'm only 16. I don't know what's going on to make these big life decisions. But one of the things that they told me that one of the things they were using to try to lure me was, we want to take you and one other dancer to China with the main company. Just you two. We're going to choose you guys out of the studio company to go. And her name is Misty Copeland. So it's just funny because, like, you know, full circle now. And even then, like, I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So they changed my mind, and I ended up going to New York and joining the studio company. And I was sleeping on another dancer from the company's couch, Adrienne Schulte. And I met Misty the first week I was there, and we just immediately hit it off. And we went to China, like, a week later, Misty?
Yeah.
And we had all these adventures, and we became best friends immediately. And we wrote this little book on our first tour with the company to China. And it's somewhere, we still don't know where it is. We think it's maybe with Misty's mother-in-law in storage or something. But
what was the book? Like, what was it about? Just like a diary kind of?
Yeah, it was like about our adventures as the two youngest people in ABT at the time, you know, like, and how we were trying to fit in and trying to get, you know, noticed and trying to do our best. And obviously it was just really intimidating and difficult and just, yeah, we were playing Mariah Carey in the hotel room at night and eating Pringles because there was no food that we could eat because we were afraid we were going to get like poisoned or something.
I'm a huge lamb, so I know very much about Mariah shepherding you through the artistic experiences. So
I feel like publishing houses are listening, saying like, how do we find this book and get it out there? Because that sounds so fun.
But also, I just think it just makes me think of like ballet is so unique in that way. Like, I think it's so special that we, most of our friends, many of our friends are people we've known for literal decades at this point. And you just have that implicit trust when you are in this point in your life right now where you're working together. It's like you've built years of trust and like dependency on one another. So it's so cool that you guys are able to collaborate in this way. But let's circle back to that. There's so much to talk about. We want to hear just quickly, Misty, about your book writing. I mean, this book that you wrote about your mentor, Raven Wilkinson, what made you feel like that was an important story for you to get out there?
Yeah, it started, Raven and I had such an incredible relationship. Learning about her story at a late stage in my career. I was a soloist. I had been a soloist for maybe 4 or 5 years already at that point at ABT, and learning about her story gave me this different sense of kind of purpose and hope for not only my future, but the future of so many Black and brown dancers. And I felt like I had a different type of responsibility than I ever thought I did in kind of carrying out the efforts of what so many Black and brown dancers intended for their careers or, dreamed that they could have had, only, half of what I have. And it was amazing to actually meet her and share something really special. But it started with my book, Black Ballerinas, in wanting to be able to highlight different dancers, whether or not they had gone on to dance in professional companies, but showing the journey of all of these dancers, and that it's been this collective effort to get me to this point and so many other Black and brown dancers, and that they really are a part of ballet history, not Black ballet history, ballet history as a whole. And I got to give a little glimpse of Raven's story as she was profiled in that book. And then it became, this idea kind of grew. I had wanted to write a book about Raven for many years, but it transformed into it being about her impact on me and on the ballet world, and more about how she kind of pushed me to see more in myself. And it was such an emotional journey. She had passed already. I was pregnant at the time when I was writing it. I gave birth, finished the book like 2 days later. It was such a crazy, emotional and hectic time, but I think it just added to the book in like a really meaningful and beautiful way.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I like this kind of theme of, Misty, you were dealing with an injury, with, being pregnant, and then not having dancing in your life in that moment, and then kind of like finding these other ways to connect. And I think Leyla, kind of the same, right? Finding ways, how can we all still connect to ballet? And that's something that Michael and I certainly feel all the time too, which is why we like to do this. So how did the idea of you guys coming together and collaborating in a new way come about?
I'm like, who wants to start?
I mean, so like I stopped dancing professionally after only 1 year in ABT. And then I was like, well, maybe I'm not, fully content because I need to do like contemporary work. So I danced at ballet tech for a year. And then
cool. I've taught for them and I know Elliot well. Yeah.
And so I was like, oh no, I think this is not for me professionally. And there's so much like, and I know this is a newly ongoing conversation, which is a conversation that needs to be had, but about like mental health and how to allow a dancer to phase into a company professionally, because it's very different from going from a school and being a student and then being thrust into this like world. So I think for me at the time, that was back in like 2001 or whatever, it was difficult, like to go through that on my own. And luckily I did have a friend like Misty. But I ended up going back to school and studying film and television. And I became a TV writer and producer for the past 18 years. And I think around 2015 or 2016, Misty and we had a conversation. I was like, you're doing so much with your voice. Like you're amplifying your voice. Like you should have a production company. Like let's start a production company together. And she was like, I don't know what that would entail. And I was like, I don't either, but I know a little bit about production. Like, let's see what we can do. And so that started our journey. And I think like Misty said, like over the course of the pandemic was really when we buckled down and like figured out what we were trying to say and what we were trying to do with all of this. So yeah, Misty, like, do you want to say more about like what we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, it's always been difficult to see the way that ballet is perceived, how it's shown in film and on television and in media, because Leyla and I have always felt like this is not a true representation of all of the layers and all that we are as artists and ballet dancers. It's so one-sided, and and it keeps perpetuating the same tropes. And we want to show, like, I always say, I can't imagine, a mother, parents watching The Black Swan and feeling like, oh, I want to put my child in ballet. Like, I feel like it's doing us,
sounds great.
Right? It's doing us a disservice. And what are the stories we can tell within this art form and beyond that are going to make people want to be a part of the arts and see the importance of it and see the value of it. And so it's kind of evolved from there. We definitely have a lot of dance content that we're developing, but beyond that, it's really, I think, about telling authentic stories that about women of color, of artists. So we've got a pretty big range of things that we're developing. But Flower, our short film that premiered, I guess 2 weeks ago now, maybe at Tribeca Film Festival, was really the first that has actually, like, we've seen through, like, to fruition. And it's beautiful just how it came about during the pandemic. And I think that it's a really good representation of who we are and our voice as Life in Motion Productions. And that sets us apart. That's really unique. And I don't think we've seen storytelling in this way. And it's exciting.
So you kind of developed this idea for the production company. You're talking about the stories you want to tell. You have ideas for projects. How does Flower become your first priority and your first output? And tell us kind of how the initial idea came about for this particular film.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Misty had been performing, and Nelson George, who did the documentary A Ballerina's Tale about almost 10 years ago now, he had gone to see Misty perform, and afterwards they had a conversation, and he was like, on stage, you're a storyteller and you're acting, right? And I would love to translate that onto the screen. Like maybe that we can do like a silent film, or play on a silent film. And so it sort of evolved from there. Then they came to me and we started, developing this idea and figuring out what story we wanted to tell. It really came down to like, well, Misty, what story is important to you? What community is important to you? And we feel like, ballets, classical ballets, full-length ballets are stories that have a message and a theme, but they're all from like the 1800s, and so a lot of times they're not relatable or they don't feel current. And so if the idea is to bring in new audiences to be exposed to dance and to be exposed to ballet, it's very hard to do that if you're showing them something that they don't relate to. And so we're focusing on this community in Oakland, California. Oakland is a city that's near and dear to Misty's heart. Her husband's from there. And she's been going for like 15 years back and forth. And it has this incredibly rich social, cultural awareness. Like the kids are doing youth activism, and there's all of these organizations that intertwine movement and art and music, and social justice. And so we were inspired by that community, but we also were like, well, what do we want to, what do they have to say? Like, what's going on in that community? So we went and did a research trip in Oakland, and we met with different organizations and kids and adults and the mayor. And we noticed that there's a huge housing crisis because of gentrification, first because of big tech in Silicon Valley, but it sort of permeated and now we're seeing it across the country. There's a lot of homelessness and houselessness. And so we wanted to figure out a way to show that story, but not from the perspective that you've seen on screen before, which I think we all have this idea that of what a homeless person looks like from TV shows or movies. And it's always the same. It's like an older man of color, wearing really scrappy clothes, and kind of panhandling or something. And we're like, well, that's not the real story, because 40 million Americans right now are in danger of becoming houseless. So of those 40 million, they don't all look the same. It can happen to anybody. And so the story that is being told, Misty's character, she stars in it, and it's absolutely incredible. It's about like a woman who is in danger of losing her home, her childhood home. And we ended up casting with Christina Johnson, the legendary Christina Johnson from Dance Theater of Harlem. We also have Babatunji Johnson, who they're not related, even though they're both Johnsons, but he has an incredible story himself, and he's absolutely incredible dancer. He moves like so fluidly, and he can do any style. He was self-trained. Now he dances a lot with Lions Ballet, but he choreographs as well. And he started with breakdancing, can pretty much do anything. So the two of them were our main co-stars with Misty. And then we had people from the community be a part of the film. That was really important to us. Like, we're telling their story. We want them to be telling their own story. So we have turf dancers, which is another really interesting thing. Dance, is universal, and every city has their own style of dance that they've created on the streets or, in different communities and neighborhoods. And so there in Oakland, it's turf dancing. And so there's lots of turf dancers in the film. And we even feature some baby ballerinas. And so like that, it all sort of came together. I mean, it was definitely a difficult process doing it during COVID and during the pandemic. Lots of challenges and things like that, but it came into this beautiful picture, and everybody we've shown so far, the film has really resonated on so many different levels, like whether it was just connecting so much with Misty's character and what she's dealing with in the film. Her mother Christina Johnson has dementia. Or if it was somebody who has experienced houselessness in their life, or just young kids who are loving dance and loving the music that we have in there. We had Raphael Sadiq did the music. So overall, like, it's been an amazing and rewarding experience to put the film out into the world, because we're like, wow, people like it and they get it. And like, you make more of this kind of stuff.
I don't think it was even, I think that, we've been, during the pandemic, we've been pitching many shows and developing many shows. So it wasn't that we were like, oh, Flower is going to be the first. It just happened to be first. And once we realized, what it could be, we really put all of our focus into it. But it just happened to be the first one to develop and come to fruition.
Yeah.
Could we hear a little bit more about the filming process? You've already brought up it was during COVID, so there's just so much to dive into, like the logistics of that. And the story it's heavy business, like that. Was it emotionally wearing on you guys as you're in the filming process? Kind of just go through what the day-to-day was like for us.
We're laughing because there's so many layers to it. And I think it's important for people to hear, that nothing's easy in life. And I think there's something so beautiful about going through the process like this. And when creating art, it makes you appreciate it more. It really allows you to like really dive in and understand the characters more. I think when you have the time and you're as hands-on as Leyla and I have been as producers throughout the entire project. I mean, of course I was in it, but we didn't kind of just step back as producers and let things happen. It was really collaborative, whether it was with Alonzo King, who was, choreographer, our director, Lauren Feinerman, Rich and Tone, who were choreographers for the street dancers, or even just within the community, allowing their voices to be heard and really be a part of the story that we were telling. But Leyla can, I guess, walk you through the process of like from beginning to end of what it took from raising the funds to finding the right team to the editing process. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
Right.
Somebody told me, I think it was Mary Jo when we were at the Jacob Burns Center, but she said something like, she always says, like, if you want to get something done, give it to a dancer.
Yeah.
I love that.
We like always find a way. Like there's something about, and I think that's so important too with like Misty and my story. Like I didn't continue on dancing in the ballet company, but the skills that I learned from being a classically trained dancer or dancer in general and being in a company and then going into, another profession, like those skills, like they can take you anywhere. It's that determination and that hard work ethic, the ability to like put on the blinders and like just go. So yeah, we did have a lot of challenges and a lot of stress, very stressful process. But I think I would encourage people to do something like this because you're not relying, all of our other development that we're doing, we are, it's like we have these gatekeepers who are telling us whether we can go or not. We're waiting for this green light all the time. And even when we get a green light, sometimes it doesn't end up working out. Like we're just constantly throwing coals in the fire because it's not, our fate is not in our hands. But with this, it was like we did everything from start to finish. It made it so much harder, like so much harder. But like Misty said, like it feels so much more like gratifying, gratuitous because we did it all on our own and we made it happen. Like it was the only person who was going to do it was us. So it started with like fundraising, which was very challenging. And I think going into it, Misty would always say, like, I want to make sure people don't think like we're these two little dancers, because that sometimes dancers get like pigeonholed in that way as well, because there's such a like hierarchical structure in the dance studio where you have your teacher or your coach, and then it's always like student teacher type of thing. So we can be very like, yes, and so this was really just like being a boss, like we're going to come in here and we're going to pitch you and we want you to give us money to make this film and believe in what our idea is. So that was like, it was a learning process to even get to that point. And then of course to get enough money and funding to make the film was tough, especially during a pandemic when like no one knew what was happening. But we did it. And I think like it's a testament also to Misty and her work ethic. Like it's taken her through her whole career of being incredibly resilient, regardless of like how people may have viewed her, or stigmatized her or thought that, we're not going to give you this opportunity. Like she made her own opportunities and she figured it out. And she was constantly coaching me and cheering me on, which is so necessary. You always need to have somebody in your corner. And she was like, every time like something wasn't going right, she's like, it's okay. Just keep going. going. And so we did. And we got to the point where we raised the funds and we got to Oakland so that we could shoot a concept trailer, like not even like the full film, like something to get more money to make a full film. And we did it and we put it together in like 72 hours and we came back to New York City. And a week later, everything was shut down. It was like March, 7th, 2020. And then like March 13th, 2020, everything got shut down. But even there, like we still buckled down during the time when everyone was just like at home, like, binge watching shows and things. Like we got on the computer and we're doing Zooms with people. And luckily people were like interested and they were like, we want to see you. We believe in you, Misty. And I guess we believe in you too, Leyla, because Misty but and we want to see what you can make and what you can do and to keep going. Like so many people are like so supportive of Misty at this stage in her career, because it's like she has already done so much. Like show us what else you can do. And this is the next iteration of that. It's getting a film like this or exposure in more households and out there so that people start to normalize this experience, this arts experience. And it doesn't become something that's niche or that you have to have been exposed to by your parent. It's just like a community thing. So I think that those were all challenges getting us to that point and that process. And then like shooting was difficult because again, it was during the pandemic. We had to pay a lot of money to do extra testing and safety procedures for COVID. We ended up getting a false positive on set and having to shut down the production for a whole day, which out of 6 days, that was a big one for us. We lost a lot of precious footage. And so then we had to regroup. And every time, again, like these are all these challenges and roadblocks that are happening. And we had to regroup and figure out how we were going to finish the film. So months later, we went back and we shot again. But at that time, Misty was pregnant. So we then had to figure out how we were going to shoot this.
Just shoot from, face up. That's
Shoot
it.
from above.
It was the big dance scene that we hadn't shot. So it was crazy. I remember Leyla, we shot it at the Orange County Performing Arts Center. And which wasn't, we had a theater booked in Oakland originally. And it was a blessing in disguise. But I remember Leyla arriving on the set and seeing me in this costume. And the first thing she was like, "Oh my God, your boobs are so big." And I was like, "I know." What do I do? And so,
I was trying to get continuity,
I was just going to say continuity. Oh no. That's so good.
Yeah, I mean, those extra scenes that we had to go back and reshoot ended up being my favorite scenes in the whole film. I think that every time we had these challenges and these things that came up, like when we pivoted and we found a solution, as dancers do, it always turned out to be a better outcome. So it was always like, okay, happy accident, we'll find something better.
Your next project's going to feel so easy. You're going to be like, "Oh, we don't have to go through any of these hoops." Awesome. Baptism by fire with this one.
Yeah.
But the editing process to me, it was such a big learning curve, but also like really like gratifying, like to really be a part of, that's another aspect of storytelling that I'd never knew about in order to really appreciate. And then once we finally got something we were like happy with, then it was like, okay, well, now we need to get it out there. And so Leyla went through the whole process pretty much on her own, submitting to all the festivals. And we came up against another issue, which we weren't really aware of when we made the film, but it's a long short. So it can't really fit into a shorts program within a film festival because it's 28 minutes long. We were very fortunate with Tribeca that they just fell in love with it and they decided to give us a standalone premiere screening, which doesn't happen with shorts. So it a really beautiful experience. And then they ended up finding a way. They made us the last in their shorts program, but it did take away like spots from a lot of shorts because we took a chunk of time. So we learned a lot. We learned a lot with this film. But really our intentions were to get it out there to as many people. We're doing a ton of screenings at different organizations and schools, public schools for children to be able to see it and see this form of storytelling. But we're looking for distribution and we're hoping that this would be the first episode in a series, of using this form of storytelling with, social justice and focusing on different communities and what they're going through in these communities and also highlighting the dance styles within these communities.
You guys are setting up free viewings, is that right? If people listening wanted to try to do that in their community, tell us how they can go about it.
So we're working on social impact screenings across the country and maybe even internationally as well. If you go to @OaklandFlowerFilm, it's our Instagram handle. There is a link there that will tell you how to submit a request to be part of the social impact screening tour. And so they've been free. There is also an option for us to make an appearance if we're able to. But really the point is to just get it out there, get this kind of content out there. The power of media, film and television and multimedia to shape minds. And it's like everything that we perceive about the world comes from what the content that we're taking in. So for us to tell these positive stories, but also expose people to the arts and specifically dance and ballet, it's really important. And we're hoping that this will be like really effective.
Right. Well, I think what you're doing is super important and beautiful, but I want to circle back to something that I feel like is equally important to this storytelling. And it's that you guys, like, the amount of work that you put into it, but also I think it's important to know that people as successful and who are guiding these stories, like you guys, you do experience imposter syndrome. It's such a dancer thing, that like you go back to that, like you said, like student teacher mentality, but that you bonded together and supported one another to push past that and to make this project happen. I think that's also a uniquely dancerly thing, but it is funny how we can just like kind of like gaslight ourselves into thinking that we don't deserve something, or we're like we can't do something because we're so highly skilled in one arena, and then you kind of have an expectation that maybe like you have to be as good as that in other things, but it's okay to learn and to grow.
Yeah.
I feel like we've been really, Misty and I have spoken about this a few times, but we've been really honest and forthcoming about that. This is the first time we're going through this process. I'm like, I'm an Emmy-winning TV producer and writer. Like for 18 years, that's a long time, but I've never made a film. And so we've been really like open with people about that. Sometimes people have taken advantage of that, of us. And then other times people like, it makes them maybe not, have faith in us or have trust in us. But I think at the end of the day, like the support that we have for one another helps to keep us like on the track of like, we can get this done. And then I told Misty after Tribeca, I was like, we can do this. Like, this is easy. Like, it's not rocket science. Like, we got this. But it was only after going through the whole process of like experiencing it and learning it that I'm like, okay, we can do this now. Number one, we're moms. So we're superheroes already from that. Mm-hmm. And number two, we're dancers. We can do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also it could be easy for people to think like, oh, it's Misty Copeland. Like the opportunities just fall in her lap. Like that might be something that people can think. And so I think it's so important to hear how much legwork you guys had to put in kind of regardless.
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's not hard for us to have a door open for us and get a meeting.
Sure.
I'd say 90% of the time our experience has been that everyone shows up to those meetings because they want me to sign books for their kids and take pictures, and that's it. And then nothing comes of it. And it's really just like a free opportunity for them to have like a meet and greet. And then, maybe they don't, they don't know what we're capable of. And and so, it's just, we just have to keep going. We had to take, things into our own hands and really create something on our own and say, this is what we can do. And so that's why I think Flower is so special as our first film, because it's something that we did on our own. But going back to what you were saying about like imposter syndrome, I think that it's important to like recognize, the value that we bring from our experiences, that we may not have all the skills yet to do this specific thing, but we bring so much value from what we've learned as dancers, from what Leyla has also learned as a writer and producer, and that there's so much to take from that.
Mm-hmm. I loved what Leyla said, where you're just like, I have an Emmy. Like, you have to sometimes just like remind yourself, right? You're just like, I'm good. I have value.
Well, I bring up like the moment when we were trying to fundraise and somebody said something like, well, you're going to have a hard time fundraising because if people know you just had a baby. And I would just like, I remember being 50s, like, what? Like, I just had a baby. Like, I'm feeling really good about myself because I just had a baby.
I can do anything.
That's like crazy. But I also think back to like when I was I'll never forget one time when I was starting point work and my shoes, there was like blood coming through my point shoes, right? Like, and I just kept going, and like, you just keep like you blisters and all this, and you just keep dancing every day. You come into the studio, you're so sore. You're like, I can barely walk. I can barely climb the subway stairs to get to the studio. But once you get in the studio, you do it. And to get through that kind of like pain and mental strength, I think is like no other. Like you can't tell me I can't do something at this point.
Right.
So good. I love it.
Yeah. So Flower is just the first in what we hope are many productions. Can you tell us a few things you have in the pipeline right now?
Yeah. Leyla, do you want to?
Yes. So we are really excited because we've been working for actually a couple of years now on a feature film about Maria Tallchief. So that should be really exciting. And we've been doing like a lot of, we want to make sure we're really authentic to the story. And so we have some very important people as part of the project who will help us get to that authentic part. We're also working on some animated series. We're working on a documentary about Misty at this stage in her career, which I think is something that's so relatable to so many people. And just this iconic, figure who has paved a path for so many, and like, what's next? What's the next chapter? And what else, Misty? What else do we have on the list? We've got a bunch of stuff going on.
I'm like, there's a lot of things. I don't know what we can and can't talk about.
So I think that after a project like this that had so many hurdles that you had to overcome, it could have been possible to be like, okay, we've done that. Now we know what that's like. Check that off the bucket list. But it certainly sounds like you guys are even hungrier than ever to continue with this project. And so I think that's so great. And we absolutely look forward to seeing what you guys create in the future. But I just wonder overall what you hope that audiences take away from this beautiful film.
I hope that they see this form of storytelling and that they can relate to it, and that they understand it, and they see the power of dance and the power of movement, and that it's universal, that they see the hope and resilience within this story. That it all comes back to everything that I'm always talking about, is having a support system, having a circle of people around you that you trust and believe in you. And community is such a big part of that. And I think within this film, that it's really about community and knowing that you're not in this alone, in this life and in this world. The beauty of movement and storytelling on film.
Leyla, any last thoughts?
I agree completely what Misty said in terms of like the film itself. I think also like from the outside of the film, the story of how we made it and how we got it out there. I think that is a great testament to all of the things she said about the film, like community and friendship and support, belonging, like all of those elements. And then of course, like the homelessness issue, the housing crisis, like this is something that we all need to take a closer look at and see how we can help affect the change, and how we're connected to these stories. And this is stuff that's happening in all these, in our backyard. And so I hope that people just have some more empathy for this and see if they can help and join the cause.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us. We hope all of our listeners go seek out the film, and we would love to have you back on to talk about any of your future projects. I mean, a Maria Tallchief feature, sign me up.
Absolutely.
I'm a Maria stan.
And
thank you both so much.
I think the moral of the story is if you want something done, have a dancer do it. We're going to put it on a pillow, embroider it. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much.
Conversations on Dance is part of the ACAST Creator Network. For more information, visit conversationsondancepod.com.